Hey guys, Atsu here. This is going to be my first impressions, reviews, and recommendations for Cyno and Candace, who are now arriving to Genshin Impact patch 3.1. Let's get straight into the gameplay. If I mess up this rotation, I apologize. It's very tricky. There's a lot of stuff going on here, but hopefully I get it correct. So, let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this, and I've already messed up the rotation because I put the Zhongli shield on way too late, but let's begin regardless. Okay, here we go. All right, that's good. That's good. Perfect. Beautiful. Looking very clean. Beautiful. Oh! And as you can see, we still have the elemental burst up with plenty of time to spare. So let me explain to you guys what just happened, because there's a lot going on in this rotation and it is a little bit confusing. Welcome to this guide. Enjoy. So, exactly what happened just now. I'm going to be using Young Razore, aka Razor language, to try and explain this so that myself, along with all the fellow other casual players that watch my videos, get an idea of what's going on. Zhongli is the shield. Zhongli's pillar gives buffs because of Zhongli's artifact set. Cyno is Unga Bunga Hulkman in Jackal mode, attacks in Electro, has a ground pound or ground slam attack with an elemental skill, very short cooldown. Candace is gonna buff the normal attack damage when it's in Electro form for our boy Cyno. So Candace will only buff after the elemental burst she drops, and she will only buff elemental damage that's normal attack damage as well. So you have to have colors, no white numbers. White numbers are physical damage. Atsu, aka the Dendro Traveler, is there to create reactions with Dendro. Dendro and Electro is going to increase damage significantly for Cyno, and something that's going to be very important to note is the eyeball, guys. The eyeball. Yes, the eyeball. So exactly what is the eyeball? Let me show you guys here right now. So let's put this down. Boom, 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 boom. We'll take some time here. Just wait a little bit. Okay, boom. Right, you know what? Let me reset my shield here. I'm going to put the meteorite down. And then we're going to do this. And then we're going to do this. So, I'm going to do a ground pound here. So, as you can see, the eyeball, boom, appears. And then the eyeball just turned gold. And what you saw there was a bunch of shockwaves coming out of Cyno. So, if you're paying attention here, there's a bunch of shockwaves that come out. Now, if I don't hit the eyeball and I miss, no shockwaves. And you want shockwaves, because if you don't have shockwaves, you're going to end up losing a ton of damage, because those shockwaves, they do a fair amount of damage. And the thing that gets tricky with this is the artifact set that you're going to be using on Cyno, and I will explain exactly how different builds are going to rotate differently, but it is very, there's a lot of information to digest, basically. So let's go and recharge our elemental burst, and I'll show you guys exactly what's going on. So why does the build on Cyno matter? As I just showed you guys, the eyeballs are very important in helping you deal a lot of damage. If we insert the clip here from earlier, as you can see, there's like 30,000+ damage, 20,000+ damage, 10,000+ damage coming together, which in terms of total is close to 65,000 to 70,000 damage. And this is a Constellation 0 talent level 699 Cyno. So it can still go up. If you go up to level 10 and you double crown or even triple crown him, you can increase that damage. You don't need to take his talent levels past level 6 or even level 1, to be honest, unless you care about his physical damage attack string for the normal attacks here. But as long as you have your elemental skill and elemental burst leveled up, that's the main source of damage. But as you can see, Constellation 0, and he's able to hit for 70k when you land those eyeballs. And on top of that, he has the really fast attack string. Now, this is where things are going to get tricky. Thundering Fury is the artifact set that I'm using on Cyno, and with Thundering Fury, to make it really simple, it makes your elemental skill come off cooldown even faster every time you do a reaction. Specifically here, it will reduce your elemental skill cooldown by 1 second, and it will do this every 0.8 seconds you're able to do reactions. And what's the problem with this? Well, the eyeball, I believe, is on a 4-second cooldown. It will appear every 4 seconds, and you get a total of 4 of those eyeballs during a perfect rotation. And then on top of that, you have the elemental skill during his Jackal form, which is on a 3-second cooldown. Now, when you are able to reduce the cooldown of that 3-second cooldown by 1 second, or maybe even 2 seconds, because you can technically do this every 0.8 seconds, it really messes up your rotation, because if you are mashing your elemental skill key, in fact, I will show you what it looks like against Tartaglia here. If you are just mashing your elemental skill key, you are going to be ruining your attack string, and you're also going to be missing a ton of eyeballs. And it sounds so weird when you're like, oh, you're missing eyeballs? What does that mean? Anyway, let's do this. Okay, so we're gonna drop that, and look at this attack string here. So that final plunge there is going to be a really large attack that, and you can just see, that was the perfect example. Editor-san, please bring that back. What just happened there? I cancelled my little lunge here, as you can see, where he's jabbing the spear into the ground, and the elemental skill overrid the animation of that lunge there. And because of that, I lost so much damage. And my timing of the eyeball is scuffed. So that is the downside of Thundering Fury. If you don't have full control of your rotation, you're actually going to end up losing a lot of damage. And in that case, you're way better off using the Gilded Dreams artifact set. If we can have an image of that on the screen, that would be perfect. So what is the difference with Gilded Dreams, Gladiators, or Thundering Fury? All of those artifact sets are going to be really nice on Cyno, but they all have their nuances. So Thundering Fury, as I've shown you there, makes your cooldown for your elemental skill really short, which can really mess up your rotation. If you're able to master it though, I do think this is still the best artifact set to go for alongside Gilded Dreams. And what does Gilded Dreams do? Well, you've got a whole mini essay here, which I'm going to make sure it's easier to understand by using Razor language. So, Elemental Mastery plus 80. Within 8 seconds of triggering an elemental reaction, so every time you do an elemental reaction, you can gain buffs for Cyno, assuming we're equipping this set to Cyno. Depending on the other elemental types of the characters in your party, so if you have other Electro characters, you will gain 14% attack for each of the same elements, so in this case Electro, or you will gain 50 Elemental Mastery, in which case the party that I'm using right now of Zhongli, Cyno Candace, and Dendro Traveler, they're all different elements, and you have 3 other characters that are different elements, so I will gain 50 Elemental Mastery for each of those characters, totaling for 150 from that second passive. And then when you add it onto the first passive, that's 230 Elemental Mastery, which is a lot. Especially if you're using this weapon, Staff of the Scarlet Sands. And I cannot stress how good this weapon is for Cyno. It's also really good for Xiangling and for any other elemental skill characters or elemental characters that use Elemental Mastery. You have crit rate at 44.1%, which is insane, the same as the Jade Cutter. And then you have this really good passive, which ideally wants you to have a lot of Elemental Mastery. And if you have a lot of Elemental Mastery, it will convert that Elemental Mastery into attack stat, which is really good. So essentially what this weapon gives you is crit rate, Elemental Mastery, or the go sign to use Elemental Mastery, as well as attack stat, which is really good. 52% of Elemental Mastery as bonus attack. That's just a default. And when an elemental skill hits an opponent, every 10 seconds, the equipping character will gain 28% of their Elemental Mastery as a bonus, and you can stack this up to 3 times for 72%, plus the 52% is 130% of your Elemental Mastery. So if you have 500 Elemental Mastery, that is 650 attack stat that you will be gaining after you've landed your 3rd elemental skill, which is crazy. That's a lot of attack stat. And yes, if you don't have this weapon, I do think it is a small L. I think it's going to be very difficult to gain any sort of noticeable or significant damage out of Cyno if you're not using the Staff of the Scarlet Sands, which honestly speaking, it sucks. I know it sucks. I know there's another weapon that's coming out that gives you attack and Elemental Mastery, the 4-star free-to-play weapon. That will be decent on him, but it will not be anywhere near as good as this weapon. I think this weapon is going to be head and shoulders a must-have, and it just looks fantastic on him as well. So I'm not trying to tell you that you have to pull for this weapon, but if you do want to make the most out of Cyno, at the moment my Cyno here is C0R1. It is achievable if you get lucky, especially on the weapons banner, but it's not necessary to go for that weapon. I do recommend going for that weapon though. So, what else is there to Cyno before we go and talk about Candace? Let's go over the pluses and the minuses, advantages and disadvantages. So, Cyno, good and the bad. The good thing is, I think he's a pretty decent hyper carry once you get his rotations down, and aesthetically speaking, one of, if not my favorite characters in the game. I've been asking for a long time for a character that fights with gauntlets or claws, and my ideal element for that was Electro. It's like Hoyoverse was sitting back there watching me and hearing me complain all the time, when are we gonna have that? Because after Hazo came out and showed us that we can have a character that fights with their fists, I kept demanding and even all the way back before Hazo, I still wanted a character like this. Aesthetically speaking, white hair, red eyes, chef's kisses. But simping aside, there's a lot of downsides to Cyno, if I'm being very honest with you. He really does require a character that's kind of babysitting him for either healing or shielding. My preference would be shielding so I don't get staggered, so I don't get knocked out of my combo. And the only one that's gonna last over 18 seconds, guys, yes, you guessed it, it's Zhongli. Much like Xiao or Hu Tao, Zhongli is gonna be really nice to have if you want the super easy way to play these characters without dodging all the time, without getting your animations cancelled. Zhongli is the solution, but Zhongli might not necessarily be the most optimal, so that's something you have to weigh up for your own preference. The other thing is that's good for him is that he can play with a lot of different characters. All the Electro characters synergize well. You can have him as a hyper carry once his elemental burst is down, and if you don't have your energy recharge sorted out, you can switch to your other character like Raiden or Yaemiko or Beidou or Fischl, etc. Beidou and Fischl can also work as support to Cyno as well, but those are options that you can take. Of course, Dori and Shinobu can also be used, as well as Sara, to support Cyno as well. All the other supports that you've had in the game like Yelan, Xingqiu, Bennett, all of those work as well. But for me, I do think the best teams that you can use for Cyno is going to be the Dendro, Main Traveler, Aggravate, and Quicken composition. The downside is, of course, while Dendro main character I think is very good, I feel like a lot of people don't want to play with their main character. The other two Dendro characters are not good for Cyno. Their application of Dendro is very poor, and I think we really need right now a Dendro applicator in the ranks of Xingqiu or Yelan, like the equivalent where they can consistently hit the enemy in tangent with your normal attacks of Cyno with Dendro. So that will probably be either Nahida, it might be Al-Haytham, or it might be Baizhu. We'll just have to wait and see in the future what's going to happen, but I do think this is an instance where it's going to be like Ganyu, it's going to be like Yoimiya, it's going to be like Xiao, it's going to be like Hu Tao, where you want to have uptime on your character, so you want to shield them and you want to protect them, so Zhongli is going to come through there. The other thing is the damage. I feel like a lot of backlash is on the way because a lot of people won't understand the importance of landing the elemental skill during the eyeball, meaning they're gonna miss out on a lot of damage. And if you want a lot of damage on top of that, he's a character that one does want to have his signature weapon, the other is the constellations, and I'm just looking at them. I haven't even activated them yet, but just by looking at them I can tell the constellations will make such a huge difference to his damage. The first one is going to increase Cyno's normal attack speed by 20%. And it's going to be really difficult for you to mess this up and not get the full 20 seconds that you can get from this, which is kind of insane. The second constellation, which is also very good, is when Cyno's normal attacks hit opponents, his electro damage bonus will increase by 10% for 4 seconds. And this has a maximum stack of 5. That is 50% bonus electro damage. That is insane. Constellation 4 is, as you can imagine, going to be something that gives you energy recharge for the rest of your team, which is nice. And Constellation 6, oh boy. Constellation 6 will allow you to fire off those shockwaves with your normal attacks. Not all of them, just one at a time, but you will still get that bonus shockwave. And those shockwaves hit for quite a lot of damage. So the Constellation 1 and 2, I do think is going to be huge on Cyno. Constellation 6 and Constellation 4, they're all really, really good constellations, but you'll just have to wait for my Constellation Showcase video to see how big of a difference that makes. The Constellations, he's kind of a pay-to-win character, but even without pay-to-win, I do think that he is phenomenal. I don't think he's a meta-defining character like Hu Tao or Ayaka or those kind of characters. Of course, not being a support character like Zhongli or Kazuha or Raiden means that they're not going to have the longevity. DPS characters always will fall off at some point because they're going to get replaced in the future. But I have to say, an incredibly, incredibly fun character to play with. Now, Candace, if you've made it to this point, Candace, what's great about her? Well, from my understanding, she's very good at boosting your normal attack damage if your character is elementally infused. I don't have an ideal build for her yet right now, and I've built her essentially as a support for Cyno right now, but I do think there is a world where Candace can also function as a damage dealing character, albeit not being the best in the world. Remember, she is a 4-star character, and the 4-star characters we get nowadays are nowhere near as good as the 4-stars that we got at the beginning. Fischl, Sucrose, Bennett, and also Sing Cho. Those are like exceptions, but I do think she is very fun to play with. At Constellation 6, I do think she is going to be a way, way, way more interesting character to play with than at Constellation 0. So that is, you know, that's up to you. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Are the constellations being actually useful? And with her kit, let me disable my camera again so you can see, she'll give you a 20% damage bonus, which is a decent amount of damage bonus on top of the other damage that she's going to be doing with her elemental burst. So if I show you guys very briefly here, what does Candace do? I know this is just a very short segment at the end of the video because I do want to dedicate other videos to her to kind of demonstrate what she's capable of doing. But let's drop this, and then let's drop this, and then let's drop this. So as you can see, my normal attacks now do, as you can see here, they now do hydro damage. Now that right there is her counter mechanic, so she can play like Beidou. So if you are able to land your counter at a perfect time, you don't have to charge up. So if you get hit here, as you can see, I'm charging up, and when the triangle appears, that's when I can lunge like that. And that lunge can do a decent amount of damage if built as a DPS. Not the greatest in the world, nowhere near Beidou, but it can do a decent amount. But if I'm charging up, so if I tap this, as you can see there, I was able to do a lunge. If I don't tap it, it will be on the shorter cooldown and just be like a little poke. So that is kind of how she plays. If I just poke you here, so as you can see, it's just a shield bash, which is not interesting, and the cooldown is a lot shorter. If I time it perfectly, so I instantly charge it, and then I'm able to do the plunge downwards, which is really nice. And once again, I will show you guys the elemental burst. It gives me hydro application for any melee characters. It will give them hydro application, which is nice. If I switch to Cyno, as you can see, hydro application there as well for those characters. So that is essentially what Candace does. Her multipliers, I'm not the maths guy, so I can't 100% guarantee whether they're good or bad. From my testing, very brief testing with the support build, it's okay. It's nothing crazy, but it's okay. What I will say is once she gets to Constellation 6, when you're using elemental damage infused normal attacks, then a wave will be unleashed, a hydro wave will be unleashed, which can trigger every 2.3 seconds for AoE hydro damage at Constellation 6. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I do think for certain characters, that's going to allow you to do vaporized damage quite nicely. So we'll have to wait and see. Or alternatively, other hydro reactions. Maybe Hyper Bloom, maybe just the Bloom reactions, maybe Freeze. It's going to be nice for that as well. So there's just many things we'll have to wait and see here. But that is my first impressions, reviews, and recommendations for Cyno and Candace. Too long didn't watch. Cyno, you can go with the artifact sets, Thundering Fury, Gilded Dreams, or Gladiators. So the new 3.1 weapon, which you can see on the screen here, that will also work nicely for Cyno. It won't be anywhere near as good as this 5-star weapon, but it will work. You can put in other weapons, like other 5-star weapons. I do think they are all copium, though. Except maybe, no, this is still copium. Vortex Vanquisher is still copium. Every single one of these other weapons are low-key copium. Skyward Spine, I know it gives attack speed. I know it gives crit rate. Still copium. Staff of Homer, you're wasting HP here. It's still copium. Vortex Vanquisher, because it gives shield strength and it also allows you to stack up over time, might be winnable. Primordial Jadewing Spear might be winnable because, again, this is one of those long-lasting weapons for a hyper carry. The other weapons, I do think they're all copium. Maybe you want energy recharge on him, but I would not sacrifice 44.1% crit rate, which is just redonkulous. Deathmatch will also be okay. Yeah, I think the other weapons will not be great. White Tassel will be something that you can consider as well if you do have White Tassel. Having said that, I really do think this is the 5-star. This is the weapon you really want to go for. It will make a difference. Constellations, I can recommend C1 and C2. Even just by looking at them, I can tell C1 and C2 are both going to be disgustingly good. So that might be something you want to consider. Talent levels, priority is going to be Elemental Skill, Elemental Burst. Both of them very, very important. You want to take both of those to level 9 or level 10. Normal attack here, I don't really think this makes any difference because this has its own scaling. As you can see here, if I disable my camera, all of this has its own 1, 2, 3, 4 hit damage, different scaling. It is still considered normal attack damage though, so do keep that in mind. Please do correct me if I'm wrong on that. For Kandake, I have personally gone for Noblesse. You can also go for Emblem of Severed Fate, the energy recharge set, especially at Constellation 6, because that Constellation 6 is considered elemental burst damage. I'm just unga bungering here. I would say this can be a decent set to use. Maybe this might be winnable. I'm not 100% sure. Gilded Dreams might be winnable. I'm not 100% sure, but it would depend on the kind of Kandake that you're going for, whether you're going for support or damage dealer. I've gone with Favonius Lance. I think there are plenty of other weapons that you could potentially use. The Catch might be another one. You might want to consider Staff of Homer. Might be nice. Even Engulfing Lightning if you really want to go for energy recharge. There are better energy recharge options, so I think Favonius Lance is much better to go for. Skyward Spine, you know, it's up in the air. Deathmatch also not bad if you're going for the DPS version as well. But overall, that is my first impressions, first review, and also recommendations of Cyno. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. There's still much to explore, and I highly recommend checking out other content creators for way more in-depth guides. Mine's pretty much for casuals, but if you want to go for meta teams and meta team compositions, meta weapons, meta builds, then yeah, definitely check out Proper Theory Crafters rather than myself. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye-bye.